Congratulations to the Edmonton Oilers. I am Andrew Berkshire here for Game Over Edmonton, and your Edmonton Oilers, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Evan Bouchard, Stuart Skinner, all these amazing players are now advancing to the Stanley Cup Final. The first time the Oilers have been back to the Stanley Cup Final since 2006, which is incredible because that was the first year that I went to university. That was my first summer back in Alberta after moving out to Quebec. So it's been a wildly long time for Oilers fans to wait. They've had to wait through multiple first overall picks that didn't pan out or that ended up having to go to other places. They've waited through multiple piss poor management teams. Some would argue the current one isn't that great either. They've waited through multiple rebuilds, and here they are, finally on the cusp of accomplishing what you want to see the best player in the game accomplish. And that is the story of tonight's game. On paper, before I get in deep, obviously for the Stanley Cup Final here, we're going to continue broadcasting Game Over Edmonton from the Game Over Network Hub channel, but this is going to be the last set of games for Game Over Edmonton that are broadcast on this channel. Starting next season when we do our full launch in October 2024, Game Over Edmonton has its own channel. You can go to the Game Over Network channel right now from the link that's under this video. Open it in a new tab, scroll to the bottom to our featured channels section, click Game Over Edmonton, click subscribe, hit the drop-down menu, hit the reminder bell as well, or the notification bell, whatever it is they call it, so that you're notified when we post a video or go live. It's going to be really cool next year. We're going to have actually like your Edmonton hosts back instead of some schlub from Montreal pitching in just because he grew up partially in Alberta. And listen, I grew up with a dad who continues to be an Edmonton Oilers fan. I was a Montreal Canadiens fan, but I always had respect for the Oilers. I grew up partially in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan until I was 11 years old. And when I was living there, the star player in our town was Ryan Smith for the Moose Jaw Warriors, who ended up going to the Edmonton Oilers. So that's my connection to Edmonton, aside from also living in Fort McMurray, growing up with a lot of Oilers fans, watching a lot of Oilers games out west because that's what was on TV back before we had access to more games, regional stuff, all that garbage. All right, so let's get into today because on paper, I think you could look at the stats sheet and say that the Edmonton Oilers, on the verge of making the Stanley Cup Final, put in the worst performance of their playoffs by far. I believe in the end, the Dallas Stars controlled almost 83% of the expected goals at even strength. The Oilers generated almost nothing for offense in this game, finished the game with just 10 shots on goal, a very, very measly number. And in all situations, 77% of the expected goals in Dallas's favor. But I'm going to tell you, from watching the game overall, I think McDavid came out of the national anthem shot out of a cannon and would not be denied. He took over the first period with complete dynamism and then set up Zach Hyman for the insurance marker. And the Oilers just decided as a team, it seemed to me, that that's what they needed. That's all they needed. And they shut her down. And the rest of the game, they just tried to close around the net, protect Stuart Skinner as much as they could, limit the scoring chances of the Dallas Stars. And the Stars got a lot of shots, but for the amount of puck possession that they had in this game, I don't think they generated a lot of grade A shots. And when they did, obviously, for the most part, Skinner was there to stop them. But overall, I thought the Oilers did a pretty good job closing off the middle of the ice in this game. And they basically, I think they made a decision to cede control of the puck, to not partake in risky behavior that could upset the lead. It still came down to the final seconds, of course, right? Because that's playoff hockey. I think it would be more entertaining if they would have not taken their foot off the gas pedal and really tried to push it for the whole game. But it just seemed like the Dallas Stars couldn't get the chance that they wanted. They couldn't get that grade A, can't miss chance, either to Stuart Skinner or through Stuart Skinner. it just never materialized for them. Now, is that down to them being gassed? I saw some media saying that it seemed like the Stars had no energy. I don't think that's the case. I don't think they had no energy. I think that Edmonton just played really, really well defensively and very conservatively and didn't give up much. And that just kind of didn't work for Dallas. Like they need a bit more back and forth. I think they're the ones who like to dictate things defensively, and when the other team is doing that to them, it seemed like they couldn't adjust. At least in this game, it's an interesting series because overall you have the Oilers completely owning almost every single possession metric through the first 5 games. Almost everything that you would look at to determine who's going to score more, who's going to win the series, points in favor of Edmonton. And then they come out here and, by those same metrics, lay a proverbial stinker. But overall, I still think Edmonton wildly deserved this series. They're going to face a very, very good team in Florida. But this series, for me, answered a lot of question marks that I had about the Edmonton Oilers, even if there are still weak spots to be exploited on this team. I think that you saw Connor McDavid show up in a way that, you know, I'm not going to say he hasn't shown up before, but in terms of a playoff series, I don't know if I've seen him stand out to such a degree, not just in terms of point production, but in terms of overall dominance of the state of the game. He was incredible throughout this game or throughout this series against the Dallas Stars. He did everything you could possibly ask from a leader of a team. He was there at every moment, leading the way, scoring the clutch goals, creating opportunities, just picking defenses apart. And I mentioned in the first period, maybe it was the beginning of the second, that whenever McDavid had the puck tonight, even though the Oilers didn't have a lot of chances, it seemed like the patented reaction that every defender has when they are faced with McDavid at speed with the puck, that like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, what's he gonna do? It seemed like the Stars were very panicky when McDavid was attacking early in the game, and that really played into the Oilers' favor. It's interesting to watch the Oilers give up on pushing that right after like the beginning of the second period, but they closed it out, and you can't take that away from them. I think the most impressive thing to me overall about this Oilers run, because you expect Draisaitl to get numbers, you expect Connor McDavid to get numbers, you expect Evan Bouchard to get numbers. I don't think you can say you expect this kind of goal scoring out of Zach Hyman. Like, even with the season that he just had, this playoffs has been astonishingly great. But most of what you're getting with the Oilers is what you expect, except for the PK. The PK is incredible. Like, this is insane what they're doing right now. Like 28 straight penalty kills. It is astonishing. And also, that neutralizes one of Edmonton's biggest weaknesses, which is a lot of their players have bad control of their tempers when it comes to taking retaliatory penalties, like Darnell Nurse, like Evander Kane. So if you're insulating yourself from being hurt by those, or at least directly in terms of the score, by those bad penalties, man, you're cooking if you're the Edmonton Oilers. And then to get their power play going in the second half of the series as well, after it was pretty cold for the start. That's really impressive work by these players and this coaching staff. And I know this means nothing now. I don't have a piece of paper, um, you know, proving anything, but you can talk to our Game Over folks. And when the Oilers were in 31st place this season, when they were down in the dumps, they were still my pick for the Stanley Cup this year. So I'm not trying to do any bragging rights or anything like that. What I'm really saying is that I believe in this Oilers team, especially the players at the top, and the way that players like McDavid and Draisaitl are able to carry things for them. The way McDavid in particular in this series just was like a one-man army, impossible for the Dallas Stars to counter. Didn't matter what defensive matchups they were giving him, what forward matchups they were giving him. McDavid was tearing them to shreds. And because of that, like, He just looks like a man on a mission. I have a tough time doubting the Edmonton Oilers at this stage. Connor McDavid wants that Stanley Cup. He wants his name hammered in there for all to see. He is way too good, I think, in his mind, for it to have even taken this long to get to this point. And now he wants to close that door so the conversation becomes how many and not if. That's what I see when I look at Connor McDavid's eyes right now. And man, if you're the Florida Panthers, I know they're a great team. They're a fantastic team, and they're a physical team. They're going to be hard to counter. We're going to talk about that in the third segment. But if you're the Florida Panthers right now, you're staring at McDavid and how determined he looks, you got to be a little bit worried. You just watched a great, fantastic team in the Dallas Stars with a good defense core, a very good top three, top four, and you've also got a very deep forward group, and they could not counter this guy. Not just when they paired him with Draisaitl, they couldn't counter him at any point. That's terrifying. And, maybe you can say that the Florida Panthers have better defensive chops than the Dallas Stars. I don't know. I don't know. The Florida Panthers are a decent defensive team. They've got good goaltending too. So do the Dallas Stars, though. I would say maybe the Panthers have like top to bottom better goal scoring, or at least more consistent over the last like 3-ish years maybe. But I could be wrong about that too. I might be underestimating Dallas. I really do think Dallas was the team to beat out West if it wasn't going to be the Oilers. And for the Oilers to win this series, it's not a sweep or anything, but in terms of the underlying metrics and how they played so decisively over the Stars, where this game is really the only hiccup that they had, I'm impressed. I'm so impressed, and I do think the sky's the limit for this Oilers team, even with the glaring weaknesses that they do have at the bottom of the lineup. All right, we are going to talk about Stuart Skinner next, but first, I'm going to get you to check out Game Over, Toronto next season, and where we're going to find it.
Game Over Toronto is broadcasting from the Game Over Network channel for the playoffs, but in October, the network launches for real. For all your Game Over Toronto content, make sure you subscribe to our Toronto-specific YouTube channel. Open the Game Over Network YouTube page in a new tab from this video, scroll past the bald guy talking, and click on Game Over Toronto channel in our featured channels section. Click subscribe and make sure you hit the drop-down menu to get notified when we post videos or go live. Tell all your Maple Leaf fan friends and family to check it out, and make sure you smash that like button.
I'm just catching up on some of the comments in the stream here. I see Luke Venable says 10 shots on goal, a club record. I'm assuming is that a club record low for a playoff game in terms of shots on goal? Usually you expect those to happen in losses, but hey, win's a win. Travis Farquharson says they did what they had to do to win the game. That was so incredibly stressful. Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't have skin in the game in terms of a rooting interest, but I can tell you that it was stressful, especially towards the end of the game there, where you're hoping it doesn't go into overtime and you wonder what kind of implications that has on the series if they actually do blow it, because that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Yeah, Luke says, yeah, it is the lowest for a playoff team, or for an Oilers playoff game. That's incredible. They win with 10 shots. You can't really deny that's something to like write home about. You got to see the Edmonton Oilers advance to the Stanley Cup final, winning a game with only 10 shots. How pissed off must the Dallas Stars be right now to lose that game, only giving up 10 shots, getting so many shots themselves, not being able to get just 2 past Stuart Skinner. It's got to be a rough room to go into for them, because also they're an older team, right? A lot of those players on that Dallas Stars team, they're either in the back nines of their career or the back like one. Like Joe Pavelski this year, he's been the ageless one for so long. He's been absolutely incredible career, but he did not look great in these playoffs. It didn't look very good. Andrew Beauchamp says, we'll get the cup for Canada. Yeah, hopefully, Edmonton. I'd like to see it, just because, I mean, I wish it would have happened in a year where we were fully launched as a network and we could have all of our Oilers folks here with you, because I feel like that'd be a lot more fun. But man, it would be incredible to see a Canadian team actually make it. I saw there was a guy out of Toronto who was saying that the the Canadian teams are 0-4 in the Stanley Cup final since 1993 when the Habs last won. So Gary Bettman's entire tenure, because he took over like right at 1993. And all four of those Stanley Cup final losses are against Sunbelt teams that were like expansion teams under the Bettman era. And lo and behold, look who the Edmonton Oilers are facing in the Florida Panthers. And I'm not one to buy into the like it's rigged stuff or like the NHL's anti-Canada. I honestly think Canadian NHL teams have just been like way behind the average in terms of how they approach the game and the intelligence of the people running the teams. It seems like it's a very old guard in Canada that won't move on, and that to me is the bigger issue than the NHL. But if you like conspiracy theories, if the Oilers lose this to Florida, I'm sure that will feed into the conspiracy theory fascination very well. All right, I do want to talk about Stuart Skinner before I get too far off track. I am so impressed with how he's handled himself since he was pulled out in the series against Vancouver. You know, he's a guy who could have crumpled. You know, a second straight playoff disaster for him, where like largely Skinner was the reason why the Oilers lost last year in the second round. So to have that same feeling return, I'm sure early on in these playoffs, only to get the coach pull you out of it and start your backup for 2 games. It's got to be a mentally incredibly tough hill to climb back up from. But he just shrugged it off and got back in it, and he's been really strong since. You know, like he's not having to steal games per se, and I know that's a weird thing to say in a game where I think the Oilers were outshot like 35 or 36-10. But I don't think Skinner had to make like a ton of really difficult saves in this game. I think he made a lot of really good saves and a lot of low danger saves, and it added up cumulatively over the game in terms of the expected goals. But overall, I thought he had to be really solid, and he was really solid. He was on top of pucks for the second game in a row. I'm really impressed with his puck tracking because it has been a weakness at times in the regular season and early in the playoffs. He's just been such a battler. And I think you have to have that in the playoffs as a goalie. Like talent will get you far, but you've got to be the kind of goalie who thrives in the chaos. And he's really been good at thriving in the chaos, especially against the Dallas Stars in this series. He's just like whenever there's a net front scramble earlier in the playoffs, you could look and you could see holes where pucks were getting knocked through Stu Skinner. And in this series, when there's a net front scramble, he's got the bottom of the net covered. He's in position. He's looking for pucks. He's digging deep in there. He's getting his stick involved. All these little things that show that he's on his game, that his focus is where it needs to be. All that is pointing in the right direction. So again, Stu Skinner is in a great situation. Luke Venable says, your business model is based on the Canadian teams being in the playoffs. You have the most skin in the game. You know what? You're not wrong about that, man. I was talking with Graham last show about how your rooting interest changes when you've got, it's not even financially the skin in the game, but also you start to get to know people really deeply that you work with. And I never would have cheered for the Ottawa Senators. I really don't like the Ottawa Senators, but then I meet Charlie and Maud, and they're so great at Game Over Ottawa, and I start rooting for them to make the playoffs. And then I don't really like the Jets either. I'm still angry at Mark Scheifele for the whole Jake Evans thing. And then you got Alyssa and Brady at Game Over Winnipeg, who've been so amazing and so intelligent and fun to work with in every possible way. And you start rooting for the Jets a little bit. And then they trade for Tyler Toffoli and Sean Monahan, 2 guys you legit love. And then you're actually on Team Jets. And then they just crap the bed in the postseason again. So I guess the lesson is don't trust the Jets, trust the Oilers. But overall, what a great series. I know that it hasn't been the all-out offense that people wanted to see from these 2 teams in particular because they have a lot of offensive talent. But it's very clear that the Stars knew they couldn't play a loose game against Edmonton and allow them to dominate in the middle of the ice like they can with speed. They just couldn't risk it. Even with the strong defense core that they have, especially with the slower, older guys they have on their third pair, they just couldn't afford to play that style of game. And even though they kind of dictated the style of the series for most of the series, the Oilers just played their style and beat them anyway. So again, I don't know, the Edmonton Oilers, I'm sold. I think this is going to be the year, guys. I really do. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about the series with the Florida Panthers. We're going to preview it a little bit, look at maybe some lineup weaknesses or mismatches that might go one way or the other. And then we'll take some questions if there's anybody here in the stream chat that wants to ask anything. But first, I got to tell you all where you can find, let's do Game Over Calgary next season. Peter's going to tell you.
Game Over Calgary is relaunching in October. For all your Game Over Calgary content, make sure you subscribe to our Calgary-specific YouTube channel. Open the Game Over Network YouTube page in a new tab from this video, scroll past Andrew talking, and click on the Game Over Calgary channel in our featured channel section. Click subscribe and make sure you hit the drop-down menu to get notified when we post videos or go live. Tell all your Flames fan friends and family to check it out and join our awesome community. And make sure you smash the like button on this video right into oblivion.
Fuck. How long is the microphone off? Oh my god. I apologize, guys. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning of this segment. I was telling you all that I wanted questions from you at the end, but I also have a question for you, which is, I've been thinking about this for the last little while. Did the Florida Panthers have a easy run to the Stanley Cup final this year? I say that as somebody who believes that the Eastern Conference is stronger overall than the West, but I look at the teams that the Florida Panthers beat this year, and it could be just results-based analysis, but I did think a lot of this before. They faced a lot of teams that were either not in their window, like just out of their window, or maybe mistakenly believe that they're ready to win when they're not, right? So I wasn't that impressed with Boston this postseason. I don't think they're the same team without Bergeron. I don't think that's a controversial statement to make. They're a decent team, but they're not necessarily a contender. And I look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I don't think they've been very good for 2 years. They were terrible last year. They were terrible in the playoffs last year too. I don't think they were very good in the playoffs this year either. And I think the magic's gone a little bit there. Now it could come back. They have a lot of great players. Their core is still great, but I think you're seeing a little bit of signs of age from guys like Victor Hedman. I think the way the Lightning left that Steven Stamkos contract hanging all season long was a big issue. I think it drove a bit of a wedge there. But he was fantastic in the playoffs. I will say that. But even the New York Rangers are not like what you would call like a Stanley Cup favorite, right? Like they're a good team in terms of goaltending and finishing, and they have great star producers, but they don't really dominate play the way you expect a legit contender to do. And whenever they're against good playoff teams, they do seem to end up on the wrong side of the puck a lot. They just, like, you could argue that with the finishing and the goaltending together, they're still a legit contender, but I just don't really see them that way. I look at the teams that Edmonton beat, and I know LA, it's the third year in a row that Edmonton beat them. LA is a legit scary team. Like, they are rough. They are very good defensively. They have a lot of offensive depth, and Edmonton is just built to beat them. I honestly think that if LA were to face another team in the first round, they would be much more competitive. And then Vancouver, again, yeah, probably not a contender, but the team of destiny, right? The team that blew the charts off of all underlying finishing and saving metrics this year. They're the PDO gods that could not be defeated. They were a tough out for the Oilers, but they got them out. And then now here, Dallas, arguably the class of the West, if you're not looking at Edmonton, and the Oilers took them out. So I look at, when you're looking at the metrics and you see like Florida right now is the top team in the league, I believe, in the playoffs in terms of expected goals for percentage at 5-on-5, and Edmonton is a little bit further down, probably further down after this game because it was a bad one. But I think Edmonton has had a tougher road to get there, so I'm not sure how to balance those metrics against each other, right? Coming out of different conferences, they've played totally different teams. I do think Edmonton has had a tougher road, and that factors into who I think is going to win. David W. says the Leafs gave the Bruins in Game 2 and from 5-7 everything they could handle, and that series went 7. The Bolts were one and done this postseason earlier than the Leafs, and that left the Panthers in New York to fight over which Eastern Conference team would qualify for this month's Cup final. Yeah, I think the biggest disappointment in the East is Carolina. Like, how many years now has Carolina been the team that everyone expects? Like, this is the year they're going to take a step. This is the year that they're going to take the step. They're the playoffs Ottawa Senators, and that sucks. I hope they find a way to figure it out, because they've done a lot of good, smart stuff to build that team, and to not get rewarded for it sucks. They're the ones that are a bit surprising that the Rangers beat specifically. Luke says, if Edmonton win in 4 or 5, I'll take it back, but I believe Florida will be the toughest challenge. I do too, Luke. I'm not talking about Florida's easier path as a way to denigrate them. I do think they're built for this. They are 100% built for the playoffs. They are the worst team in the NHL in terms of playing dirty. They bully teams. They're not the biggest team. I think they're like the 15th biggest defense core in the playoffs, and the Rangers were like the smallest, or just around that same. So they're not a big, intimidating team on that end in terms of size, but they play intimidating hockey, and they score extremely effectively. They have really strong goaltending, although sometimes Bobrovsky can be inconsistent, but this is a very, very balanced team. I think if you were to put Dallas and Florida beside each other, they're very similar in terms of like roster depth, but Florida's meaner and maybe more experienced too after going on the deep run last year and hungry to win. And I mean, how many times do teams make it to the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row and lose both times? I don't think that's very often. If you go out and look like throughout history, usually if a team makes it a second time, they find a way to win that second time. So it's going to be a very, very tough series for the Edmonton Oilers. They won't be able to play a game like this, I don't think. I don't think the pace that the Panthers play at and the physicality that they bring to the game will suffer this kind of game where they're just sleepwalking through it. I think they're a little bit more dynamic than Dallas because of that physical play. They can break up those kinds of issues. But at the end of the day, this is once again a matchup where you ask yourself, is it going to be depth or star players, right? Because the Florida Panthers, they have star players, obviously. Matthew Tkachuk, some would argue, is right up there with McDavid in terms of overall impact. But I don't know. I really don't know if the Florida Panthers' top players can match up against what McDavid is doing right now. I would have thought the Dallas Stars would have had some kind of answer, but they didn't. And they got the matchups that they wanted. That's the crazy thing, is that especially on the road, the Oilers didn't work hard to get McDavid away from the matchups that Dallas wanted, and McDavid did his thing anyway. So if you've got Connor McDavid, you no longer have to play the matchup game. It's such a wild advantage. It's really crazy. AJ says the Oilers faced Tkachuk and Bennett in the Battle of Alberta many times. That is very true. Tkachuk left Calgary, and that franchise was crushed by the Oilers in the playoffs. They are the nemesis of Tkachuk. You know what, AJ? What a great point that the Edmonton Oilers could force Matthew Tkachuk to lose in the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row. What an opportunity to just twist the knife a little bit. That's amazing. You got to admit, that's a really fun opportunity. He could be the Marian Hossa, right? To lose twice in a row. Corey Perry has lost, I think he lost 3 in a row. No, he finally won with Tampa, right? Or did he go there 1 year too late? He did go there one year too late. Yeah, because he went there after they won with Montreal, and that was their second cup. So, yeah, Corey Perry's been on the other side of that too. So Corey Perry, I believe if the Oilers lose this year, could lose his 4th Stanley Cup final in 6 years. That's devastating. That's devastating. That would be horrifying to live through as a professional athlete. But hey, he's also made his 4th Stanley Cup final in the last 6 years, and there's a reason for that. And I think when you watch him closely, you can see that game in and game out. There's a reason why he's drawing into these games now at his age, and it's not just that the Oilers lack depth. Let's see what else we got here. The Oilers play the Panthers like this, I expect them to get eaten. Yeah, they can't play this kind of game against the Florida Panthers. But I think the thing to take away from the Oilers in general is like this kind of game is not the norm, right? I've seen a lot of folks on social media tonight who maybe haven't watched the Oilers in these playoffs saying like, oh, this team's going to get eaten alive by Florida, or whoever wins this series is going to get destroyed by Florida. And that may be the case. You know, the East is very strong. The Florida Panthers are absolutely incredible team, but this isn't the norm for what we've seen from the Oilers in these playoffs. This isn't even the norm for this series. Before this game, the Edmonton Oilers played 5 games where they were the better team overall against the Dallas Stars. And that's not easy to do against a team as good as the Dallas Stars. So I wouldn't read too much into how the Oilers played tonight. All right, let's tell everybody where they can find Game Over Winnipeg next season, and then we'll see if there's any questions in the stream chat. So if you have questions for me, it could be about the Oilers, it could be about whatever else, throw them in there, and I'll come back in just a minute, and we'll talk about it. Game Over Winnipeg is broadcasting from the Game Over Network channel for right now during the playoffs. However, in October, the network relaunches for real, and Game Over Winnipeg gets its own channel. So for all of your Winnipeg Jets content, fun, news, and analysis, head on over to the Game Over Winnipeg channel from the Game Over Network channel. Open it in a new tab right now, scroll past my ugly mug, all the way down, and click on the Winnipeg channel from our featured channels section. Click subscribe and make sure you hit that reminder bell so that you get notified whenever we post a video or go live. Tell all your Jets fan friends and family to come check out our awesome community. We promise they won't regret it. And make sure on this video you smash that like button right into oblivion. All right, we are back. Let's see if we've got some questions in the chat there. Oh no, I also should mention for anybody who's here from Game Over Montreal, because I know there's some who pop in once in a while when I'm hosting. Owen Beck, Memorial Cup champion. He lost it last year, even though he was an Ontario Hockey League champion with Peterborough. This year with Saginaw, 2 goals and an obliterating hit on Easton Cowan in this one, as the Saginaw Spirit upset the heavily favored London Knights, who were considered like one of the greatest junior teams of all time coming into this Memorial Cup tournament. So congrats to the Saginaw Spirit. Congrats to Montreal Canadiens prospect Owen Beck, who had a great game, and the entire rest of the roster and all the staff involved. Anytime that the London Knights do not win, it's a good thing in junior hockey, in my opinion. No offense to any London Knights fans. All right, let's see if we got some good questions here talking about the Edmonton Oilers. Luke Venables says, is the Oilers season officially a success no matter what now? That's a good question. I think for the Oilers, like, organizationally, I think you have to say yes, because you're still making the Stanley Cup final. Only 2 teams get to do that every year. If you're Connor McDavid, though, no. I think you look at him right now, for him, it's win or die. Like, he is so motivated. And I know you could probably say that about a lot of players every year in the playoffs, but when it happens to be the best and most dynamic player in the world showing that level of motivation, he wants it all. He wants everything. Oh, and I should mention, by the way, about the Memorial Cup stuff. Owen Beck was also the Memorial Cup MVP, which is pretty great for Canadiens fans who are sticking around. AJ says, Draisaitl says start of the season it was cup or bust. That's right, hey? I love that Draisaitl isn't like shy about putting stuff like that out there. I know that it's talked about a lot in the Edmonton market, like how good of a leader Leon Draisaitl is, but I don't think it's talked about much, or at least enough, outside of the Edmonton market, because I only really see Edmonton fans or media talking about it. It doesn't seem to go outside there. It probably has something to do with the fact that he's not Canadian or American. That's a bias that we have in hockey media. It sucks, but and hockey viewers, I guess, too, also have this bias because it comes from the same place. But Leon Draisaitl impresses the hell out of me. I think he's a fantastic, one of the best quotes in the game, one of the best players in the game, one of the best finishers in the game, and just an all-out leader. I really like the guy. Luke Venables says, if anyone touches Easton Cowan, we riot. Yeah, Beck drilled him hard. It was a good, clean hit. I don't think he was hurt, although he did lose. So poor Easton Cowan, but he should get used to it because he is a Maple Leafs prospect. David W. says, I see this Oilers season as a success, particularly when among Canada's NHL teams, any of the Jets, Leafs, Flames, Sens, and Habs. That said, the last 3 teams are waiting for the upcoming NHL draft. Yeah, I mean, compared to the rest of the Canadian teams, of course it's a success. It's just, I think teams have different standards based on where they are in their like competitive windows, right? Like you could argue that the Montreal Canadiens might have seen their season as a success just because they were so competitive the whole way through, despite being built to lose. If they were the same roster as the Edmonton Oilers, it would be a miserable disaster, right? So the Oilers just have such high expectations because when you have guys like Draisaitl and McDavid in their prime, you have to go for it every year. I remember harping on Ken Holland years ago when he didn't do much at the deadline, And he said, oh, well, you can't go for it every year. You can and you have to. These guys don't come around every couple of years. And luckily, the Oilers are getting there now. They've got to win 4 more to bring this home and hammer their names onto Lord Stanley's mug. I can't wait to see it. AJ says Draisaitl's a legend. He plays and performs with the craziest bad injuries. Still's playing hurt. That's right. He's got something messed up with his finger after skating around with like one ankle a couple of playoffs ago, and I believe he led the playoffs in scoring as well. Luke says Draisaitl comes across as the kind of player who's just too belligerent to lose. Got a little bit of that like Nathan McKinnon swagger, hey? Yeah, that's really good. David W. says the Habs season was somewhat successful because of their competitiveness for much of the regular season, while the Sens wasn't, considering when compared to last season. They'd finished this season nowhere close to a playoff spot. Yeah, I mean, it's the same as Buffalo, right? Buffalo fired their coach, Don Granato, who I thought was a really good coach and a good fit for them, because last year they actually came close. You know, they were scoring at will. This year the scoring dried up. A lot of those career seasons that we saw last year disappeared, and the Sabres weren't close to the playoffs this year, or at least not as close as last year. Especially in terms of like overall, like did they look like a playoff team? Devon Levi faltered for most of the season, wasn't quite ready for prime time. So that happens to teams. It absolutely does. Teams get stuck at a plateau, right? Maybe that's what we're seeing with Carolina. And maybe that's what we saw with Edmonton until this point. But I don't know. I really do think with Edmonton, it had more to do with lack of ambition and creativity from the management group, because they had the pieces to compete. They just needed to fill in the spots around with players good enough to not bring them down. And they've finally done that now. It just took a little long. You know, McDavid and Draisaitl are 27 and 28. With those two on your team, you could have had there could have been a couple cups night right now already with better management. And unfortunately, now is the first time we're seeing this potential at this stage, but they got there. They're getting there. It's going to happen. I think I do believe. Teenage Eyeballs says, I hope the Oilers lock Bouchard up long term. That's going to be a interesting contract, because has anybody got the resume to ask for more than Cale Makar, more than Evan Bouchard? Third fastest to 50 playoff points in NHL history. Like, he is an absolute monster out there. And you could make the argument that he feeds off Draisaitl and McDavid, but when I watch the three of them out there, they speak to me like a true trio, that they all feed off of each other. And yet, like, yes, McDavid is the ultimate driving force. Yes, Draisaitl is the best finisher, but Bouchard does so many little things to make their jobs easier and function with them to create dynamic plays, that even if he's not at that same stratosphere, he's close. And I do think he's up there with like the top defenseman in the NHL, especially now that his defense has come along significantly over the last season and a half. Teenage Chabot says one of the worst insurance pieces was getting Troy Stecher, who immediately had to duck out for surgery. Yeah, that didn't work out so well. Luke says, I'm so glad that this discussion of being stuck at a plateau has made it thus far without involving the Leafs. Luke, don't jinx it. Don't jinx it. I think the Leafs are just an organizational plateau. That's the problem. They are stuck forever being the rich kid who thinks they can buy a win, but never seems to pull it off. Let's see here. What else we got? You know what? I think we've had some good talks here. See if there's anything else. There's like a couple comments from David there, but in terms of questions, I think we're good there. Yes. All right. The Edmonton Oilers have succeeded in making the Stanley Cup Finals. They are your 2024 Western Conference champions, which is awesome, but the fight's not over. The battle's not over. They need to add 4 more wins to this run to make it worthwhile for Leon and Connor, as that's the goal. That's obviously the goal. All right, folks, we'll be back with the Stanley Cup Final for Game Over Edmonton. I am Andrew Berkshire. We will see you when the schedule drops for the next round. It's been really fun to chat with you guys tonight. You make it easy to do these shows solo, which is not an easy thing to do, to be able to go back and forth the stream chat in a way that is entertaining, but I've had fun. So I hope everyone watching has had fun. If you have, please like the stream, because it really does help us out. We need help pushing our stuff through the YouTube algorithm. We have no centralized way of telling all of our Game Over folks who are with us at STPN that we're back up. We're going to work on it throughout the summer, but also go subscribe to the Game Over Edmonton YouTube channel and subscribe to the Game Over Network channel as well. Thank you so much for coming out here with us tonight. We appreciate you so much, and we will see you in the Stanley Cup final. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone, happy Pride Month.